Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from wherever you're joining. Welcome back to our sessions of Fireside Chats. I know we've taken a longer break than usual, but we're really glad that we can kick off our session with today's session, which is the geopolitics of the standoff in Ukraine. I think it's all over the news, and I think we'd really like to understand about this topic. I think at least I do, and I know Shreyas was talking to me earlier today that he wants to do. So we have Ambassador P.S. Raghavan, who's served in diplomatic missions in that region. So I think he has a great insight about it. Before I give it to our before I give it to our moderator for today, Dr. Indrani Talukdar, just a brief about Asian Pathfinders. So we started in May 2020. Our aim is to be that forum, knowledge sharing platform. We keep our sessions open. We like to promote multidisciplinary dialogues and discussions. And, we have had sessions on climate change, security, physicists coming and talking to us. To today's session on geopolitics. So that's about us. If you want to know more about our sessions, you can check our social media page, and shortly we'll also be launching our website, so you can keep updated about our upcoming sessions and everything. For the ones who join regularly, you do know that our Fireside Chats happen on every weekly basis. We'll be moving to fortnightly, just because we are working on other great stuff which will be coming your way. So, and excuse me. So if you want to stay in touch with me, Shreyas, or Asian Pathfinders, you can look us up on social media. We are present. So please do reach out to us if you have any feedback, any ideas for the upcoming sessions. We always welcome ideas from the community, because this is a forum for you to learn, understand, and for us also to learn from you, because more heads together, I think, gets better ideas. So that's what. And I know Shreyas will put the community guidelines in the chat section, but just that, first and foremost, please stay on mute, because we do record our sessions and put it on YouTube later. And I think a lot of these topics can be emotive. A lot of us have different political views, and we promote different views on our forums, but we do request you to use civil and I would say, because ambassadors, they are more diplomatic language when you're putting your questions and comments. And after ambassador has made his opening remarks, Indrani will take the questions from the chat section. So before I hand it over to Indrani, just a brief about her. Dr. Indrani Talukdar is a faculty at the Sushma Swaraj Institute of Foreign Service, New Delhi. At the institute, she is engaged in training the Indian Foreign Service officers and the foreign diplomats. Before the institute, she was working as a research fellow at the Indian Council of World Affairs. Her research interests cover the foreign policy, especially with a focus on India, Russia, and Turkey, security studies, conflict resolution, and the Arctic. And she has contributed many papers related to her research. So I think, Indrani, you're the right person to moderate this session. So I'll not stay between you and the session. So over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, sir. Once again, good morning to everyone who is present here. At the outset, I would like to sincerely convey my gratitude to Asian Pathfinder for giving me this opportunity. I feel very fortunate to be able to moderate today's fireside chat with Ambassador P.S. Raghavan, sir, whom I greatly admire and respect. Sir had joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1979. He has been India's ambassador to the Czech Republic, Ireland, and Russia, and has held other diplomatic assignments in USSR, Poland, United Kingdom, Vietnam, and South Africa, interspersed with assignments in the Ministry of External Affairs, MEA, in New Delhi. He has served as Joint Secretary in the Prime Minister's office dealing with foreign affairs, nuclear energy, space, defense, and national security. Sir, in 2012, conceptualized and piloted the creation of the Development Partnership Administration, DPA, in MEA, which implements and monitors India's economic partnership programs in developing countries. Since October 2013, he was Secretary Economic Relations in MEA, steering India's bilateral and multilateral external economic engagement. Sir retired from the Indian Foreign Service in January 2016. From 2016 to 2020, he was the chairman of the National Security Advisory Board. He is now the Distinguished Fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation and also Emeritus Resource Faculty at the Rashtriya Raksha University in Gandhinagar. He writes and lectures widely on strategic security and foreign policy issues. So with this, sir, once again, I, on behalf of Asian Pathfinder and everyone from the strategic community, welcome you once again. So, sir, actually, as I said, it is an honor and privilege to be able to listen to your interpretation on such an important topic, the geopolitics of standoff over Ukraine. Though geographically we are far from the country and the crisis, but has enormous capability to have an impact on us too. As we all are observing the situation closely that has aggravated recently with the deployment of the 100,000 Russian troops near its border, the military exercise with Belarus, the exercise in the Black Sea and Sea of Azov, blocking the port of Odessa for Ukraine, though Ukraine is saying that only Turkey through the Bosphorus Strait can block Ukraine, and the fear in Kiev regarding Russia's exercise in Sea of Azov and Black Sea are unfounded. But now Russia is also talking about going into exercise of its nuclear weapons. Then the sharp statement from President Biden, which came yesterday for his citizens in Ukraine, that they must evacuate from Ukraine immediately as the situation is crazy, and that they shouldn't expect evacuation by the US troops. Already there are news of families of the Russian diplomats working in the Kievan embassy and the consulate in Ukraine that they have already vacated. Then there are these issues of West's non-agreement on the security demands by Russia, including the removal of American short and medium range missiles from its border, or on the demand of non-inclusion of Ukraine and Georgia and NATO. Though there are issues if these two countries are included, which can be a topic in itself to be dwelled later on. The rhetorics or the statements like in the US National Security Doctrine of March last year, where Russia and China has been mentioned again as advisories like the previous doctrines, including that of Trump. Then the cyber attack on Ukraine by the Actinum, which is supposedly supported by Russia's FSB. Then fragmentation within the West, including Germany and France, because of their dependence on Russia. Diplomatic failure between Russia and the West, including yesterday's meeting between Sergei Lavrov and Liz Truss of UK, is actually not helping the situation. Though Russia is downplaying the situation and the tension by talking about that the military exercises are just regular exercises, but it also projects Russia's military capabilities and strength, as well as its combat readiness from all sides. We must remember its recent combat experience in Georgia, Ukraine, and Syria. It also somewhere tries to show that Russia understands that Georgia and Ukraine won't return to Moscow's sphere of influence. In fact, one of the topmost analysts of Russia, Fyodor Lukovo, he actually talks about this particular aspect, that Russia understands that Georgia and Ukraine won't be returning back to Moscow's sphere of influence, and what Russia actually wants from them is to balance between Russia and the NATO and stop its enlargement. So Russia is also talking about peaceful coexistence with Europe, but the fear within them cannot be ruled out more if Ukraine eventually becomes a NATO member, because it will mean Ukraine trying to take back Crimea, including the port of Sevastopol, which is not at all good news for Russia. So the volcano is absolutely active, that can ruin the whole of Europe, and its repercussions will be felt everywhere. India till now has been able to balance both sides, but till now how far and from what ways it will be able to do is something which needs to be discussed. So with these thoughts, I would like to invite Raghavan sir once again. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much. I would like to, of course, first of all, thank Asian Pathfinders for inviting me to join you today. I compliment you on this great initiative of trying to get people to talk on a variety of strategic issues, not only political, but also economic and climate change and others. So thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Indrani, for the introduction, and it's great to see you again and to have you as moderator for this session. Let me share my screen to start with, because I just want to have a few visual demonstrations of where this crisis is. Indrani, you have already given a fairly panoramic description of where we stand of the crisis, where we stand today, and what is happening, and what are the fears. You've not talked about hopes, because there don't seem to be many hopes at the moment in this situation. But okay, let's start with where we are. I just want to, you said it's very far away from us. The Russian Federation actually spans Europe and Asia from above us to quite far away. So this is the place where it's happening. On the left, you can see Ukraine, you can see above it Belarus, and that orange blob that you see is the peninsula of Crimea, which in 2014 had a referendum, which was quite obviously organized by Russia, and they acceded to Russia. Russia calls it an accession, everybody else calls it an annexation. So that is the scene of action that we are talking about. This is the scene that Indrani described. You have Russian troops, allegedly 130,000 of them. They are ranged all across its borders with Ukraine on the west, and then also onto Belarus, where Russia and Belarus are having joint military exercises, and down in the Black Sea as well. Russian ships are supposed to be operating there, naval ships, and in Crimea, which of course is Russia claims as its territory. So this is the place where this high-stakes drama, if you like, is playing itself out. And in fact, yesterday, you might have seen on your TV screens, the US National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, said that Russia has everything that is required to invade Ukraine, and that according to their intelligence, it might even invade Ukraine by February 20th, when the Olympic Games in Beijing get over. Of course, he also says that we do not know whether President Putin has taken the decision to invade Ukraine, and we do not know what form the invasion will take, etc., etc. So essentially, there is an imminent threat of a Russian invasion, but all eyes are on that one man in the Kremlin, President Vladimir Putin, and everybody is asking this question: will he invade Ukraine? Will he not invade Ukraine? If he does invade Ukraine, what will he do? What does he hope to achieve in Ukraine? And then there is these other questions. If he invades Ukraine, NATO and the US have promised harsh sanctions on Russia. What are those sanctions? Is NATO actually united? Again, Indrani mentioned divisions within Europe. Is NATO actually united on sanctions? You talk about Germany and France, which have interests which are perhaps different from Eastern and Central Europe. Will a Russian invasion actually unite them, or will they continue to be divided? And then, of course, where is NATO going? Will Ukraine and Georgia join NATO? How will countries react to this? Now, Russia, on its part, of course, keeps saying that we have no intention to invade Ukraine, but we have security concerns, which the West has to heed, and the West has to address them. So you have today the situation of this scare in the region, and then you have, of course, like you are Asian Pathfinders, there are European Pathfinders there. You have all these, the President Macron of France, Chancellor Scholz of Germany. You have the Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, and Indrani mentioned the British Foreign Secretary, Foreign Minister, that is Liz Truss, who was in Moscow to meet Foreign Minister Lavrov. Foreign Minister Lavrov dismissed the conversation in one sentence, saying it was a dialogue of the deaf. So this is the hot scene that we're talking about. Now, in order to see where we reached here and what it means, I think we need to take one step back and see where this particular episode began. And I think you should start with the month of June in 2021, when President Biden, against the run of play, as it were, decided that he would meet President Putin. At that time, the relations between the US and Russia had been at a virtual standoff for 7 years. You had allegations of Russian interference in the American elections, firstly the 2016 elections, and then they said yet again in 2020 elections. There were these cyber hacking allegations called SolarWinds, where hackers from Russia were alleged to have hacked into the critical installations and institutions in the US. And there was this ransomware, where also some dark groups were hacking into commercial institutions and demanding ransom for releasing the data that they had collected. So you had all this very heated atmosphere when President Biden said that I need to talk to Russia because we need to have a stable and predictable relationship with Russia, and therefore I'm meeting President Putin. They met, they both said the meeting was very useful. They launched a dialogue, two institutionalized dialogue that they launched was one on strategic stability, which is very important in the context of what is happening today. Because strategic stability actually means the force posture, the placement of, say, short and medium range missiles targeting each other within Russia, from Russia and from NATO, confidence building measures in the military sphere. So this entire range of issues was what they agreed. They set up a dialogue, institutionalized dialogue to discuss. And then they had another dialogue on cyber, the entire range of cyber security. And now the strategic stability dialogue were proceeding reasonably well, as they both sides said. The ransomware, the cyber issue, I think got reasonably resolved, because since then, you have not heard of a single case of a ransomware attack on an American institution. So something obviously has happened. And then you had a whole lot of other dialogue initiatives. Undersecretary Victoria Nuland of the State Department went to Moscow. They had a detailed discussion on Ukraine, which is the subject again of the standoff. They agreed that they will set in motion the Minsk Accord. I'll come to that later. Then you had meetings between the Joint Chiefs of Staff of America and the Russian Chief of General Staff on military matters. They talked about deconfliction, as they call it, and about possible cooperation in Afghanistan after the American withdrawal. Then you had another State Department official to whom Russia handed over a draft Russia-US treaty and a draft Russia-NATO agreement, again dealing with security guarantees that Russia is looking at. Again, the Americans and the West said that these are maximalist demands. Obviously, anything given writing would be maximalist. But they said that there are elements there that we can talk about. Now, while this was happening, reports started appearing of this troop buildup, Russian troop buildup. People were said 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 100,000. Today the figure is 130,000. And in a variety of the range of weapons and equipment and supply line support, etc., etc. So it reached this crescendo sometime starting from November, and it has only gone up, up, up and up. And Russia, the talking goes on, number of meetings going on, but Russia keeps saying that our grievances have not been addressed. And Russia has refused to say when and if it will withdraw its troops or it will de-escalate, since it says that it has no intention to invade. So what are Russian grievances? Let's take a look at them. First and foremost, of course, Russia says, and has been saying for a long time, that NATO has expanded rapidly towards Russia's borders. Now, here is a map that shows in 1990, NATO was where all the blue countries are. The Soviet Union and its allies, the Warsaw Pact allies, were a large chunk there. And by 2009, all the Warsaw Pact members, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia at that time, have joined NATO, as also the elements, the constituents of the Soviet Union itself. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, then you had, these are the constituent elements of the Soviet Union. So the two which want to join NATO but did not join NATO are Ukraine and Georgia, and that is what Russia is talking about now. Of course, Russia says that you need to roll back NATO to pre-1997 levels. In other words, all these Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Czech Republic and Slovakia, Hungary, and then Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia should all not, your NATO's military deployment should be rolled back from there. This is of course not going to happen. This is a maximalist position. But the demand, the most important demand remains that, that Ukraine and Georgia should not join NATO. Now, if you look at Ukraine, you can see what Russia's concerns really are. Ukraine is a flat land, it's part of the North European plains, and therefore the border between Ukraine and Russia is totally porous. But in addition to that, you know, Ukraine has a lot of emotional links with Russia, has a lot of emotional links with Ukraine. Ethnically, linguistically, there are a lot of affinities. You know, the Russian nation claims its origin from Slavic tribes which were originally settled in Kiev, which were then pushed towards Moscow by the Mongol hordes. Of course, we're talking about the 15th century. But so there is this ethnic cultural links. And if you see the linguistic map, which is shown here, the orange and brown colors there depict the population, Russian-speaking population in this country. So you see, for nearly half of Ukraine, the Russian-speaking population dominates. Crimea has over 90% Russian speakers. Donetsk, as you can see on the right-hand side, and has also over 90%. So it is, Russia claims that a kind of affinity which goes beyond mere friendship. The other part, of course, is security, which is very important. Successive invasions into Russia have taken place across the Ukrainian plains. You know, you go back to Poland in the 17th century, Swedes in the 18th century, Napoleon thereafter, the Germany thereafter. They've all come through Ukraine. And so NATO in Ukraine really means Russia is vulnerable to an invasion through very porous borders and flat land all the way up to Moscow. So it simply, Russia simply cannot accept that possibility from a security consideration. The other is the port of the peninsula of Crimea, which has Sevastopol, which is Russia's only warm water port really. It is, if you want to be a great power like Russia wants to be, to regain its status as a great power, it needs to be a maritime power as well. And Sevastopol is very important to Russia's maritime power projection. You can see why also in this, you see, from Sevastopol through the Bosphorus, you get into the Mediterranean Sea. And this is the one available warm water port for Russia for its power projection. So that is why Russia took Crimea. That is why it wants to retain its position vis-a-vis Ukraine. Now, all of this, I'm not justifying all of this on moral grounds or on grounds of international law, because, you know, there are a lot of things which you can object to on moral grounds of international law. But I think one has to understand realistically that all big powers take actions which they believe are in their national interest. Morality comes as a second. It comes as an ex post facto rationalization. But this is where we are, and this is why Russia does not want Ukraine to join join NATO. It's the same situation with Georgia. Georgia doesn't figure in all this, what people keep talking about, but Georgia also, Russia's demand also is Georgia should not be in NATO. The reason is very clear. As you can see, a hostile power in Georgia would be able to create a lot of trouble in Russia's Caucasian republics, the Islamic republics, which already have separatist tendencies. If you look at Chechnya, Dagestan, Ingushetia, Balkarno-Karabakh, what's it called? It's called, sorry, Kabardino-Balkari. So in all these regions. Therefore, Russia does not want Georgia to be part of NATO. Okay, now let me just say specific demands of Russia in the current setup. Number one, Russia says, and this is what Putin has been saying all along, the Minsk Accord on Ukraine has to be fulfilled. The West is dragging its feet over it. They are encouraging Ukraine not to implement the Minsk Accord. Now, what is the Minsk Accord? After the annexation stroke accession of Crimea, the Russian-speaking population in Donetsk and Luhansk, which is the blue area on your map, agitated to separate themselves from Ukraine and to join Russia. At some point of time, they also declared independence. Their armed contingents started occupying a territory in Ukraine, obviously supported by Russia once again, and they moved at an alarming pace against a disorganized Ukrainian army till they occupied this entire portion that you can see in blue here. And they were advancing further towards what you see as marked as Mariupol. If they had reached Mariupol, they would have got a direct line to land bridge. They could have created a direct land bridge to Crimea. And therefore, Russia could have got a direct land connection to Crimea, which is a great strategic advantage. And this is what the West tried to stop. So France and Germany negotiated the Minsk Agreement, which negotiated a standstill to the fighting. The separatist advance stopped at this point. The Minsk Agreement provided for, obviously, a ceasefire, exchange of prisoners, moving back of heavy equipment from across the contact line. But importantly, that the Ukrainian constitution would be amended to give an autonomous status to this region. And then local elections would be held in this region. And then and only then will the Ukrainian army be allowed to reach the Russian border. Right now, the Ukrainian border army is in the contact line where the blue portion ends. So this is the Minsk Accord. The problem is it has not been implemented because Ukraine accepted it under duress, but Ukraine does not like it. However, the Minsk Accord has been approved by the UN Security Council. It has been endorsed by the UN Security Council. So over the years, the effort to implement the Minsk Accord has been resisted by Ukraine because it feels that its sovereignty is going to be diluted by this, because to a certain extent it reduces this area to a protectorate of the Russians. So if Ukraine becomes a federal republic. So over the years, the Americans also, in the effort to keep up the pressure on Russia, have prevented the Minsk Accord from being implemented. And today, Russia's demand is that you now do this immediately. What are the other issues? Yeah, okay. Second demand of Russia, of course, I already said Ukraine and Georgia are not to join NATO, Minsk agreements to be fulfilled. And the third demand is that the NATO missile deployment around Russia, which is increasingly becoming more and more threatening. Russia says that the missile defense shield that NATO has built around Russia, and you can see here, Poland and Germany and Romania and Turkey, of course, is not so much in the picture these days. These Europeans, the so-called missile shield that NATO has developed there, they're supposed to be missile defense systems, but as Putin says, according to today's technology, a missile defense setup can easily be converted into a missile offense system. Defensive missiles can become offensive missiles. All it requires is a software that can be applied in a few minutes' time. So Russia's demand again is that these deployments should be moved back. There should be a consultation about force postures. There should be confidence building measures and maybe a restriction of short and medium range missiles which can be deployed on either side. So these are the demands. What has the West said? The West, in fact, has been very forthcoming so far. They've said that we understand Russia's concerns and we will accept Russia's concerns, and we will, to the extent possible, of course, we will not roll back military deployments from NATO countries. We will not give you an assurance that Georgia and Ukraine will not be part of NATO. But they themselves say, look, they are not becoming part of NATO anytime soon, because we have NATO has very stringent restrictions on the kind of governance structures of these countries, on the attributes which are required to join NATO. So in practice, NATO will not be enlarged, but we cannot give you a guarantee. So as of today, there is a kernel of a settlement that is existing on the ground that has been signaled publicly, but Russia has still not accepted, and that is why we have this conundrum about what Putin will do. Okay, let us see also about something. I'll finish very soon now. Let us see what are the various alternative scenarios that are possible today. They say Putin will invade. Now, question you should ask is, why would Putin want to invade Ukraine? What does he hope to achieve? Very difficult to see. They have already got the Minsk Agreement, which actually protects Russia's interests in many ways. They want implementation of the Minsk Agreement. By invading, he's not going to achieve that. By invading a large country, what is he doing? He's creating great unpopularity within his own country. There is no stomach in Russia for invading Ukraine because people of Russia are also asking, what do you want in Ukraine? It will devastate the Russian economy. The Russian economy has not been crippled by European sanctions today, but if the West applies sanctions, which it will definitely do if Russia-Ukraine, it will devastate Russia's economy. It will make the Cold War with the US even harsher. It will unite Europe against Russia. When you now think that Europe has differing views on the way to deal with Russia, it will unite them. And from a Russian perspective, the more the Cold War becomes harsh, the more it is thrown into China's arms, the more it becomes dependent on China and becomes a junior partner of China, which is totally against what President Putin has been saying he wants Russia to become, a great power. So if you look at it from a Russian perspective, I don't see what advantage Putin can ever have in invading Russia. It's a lose-lose prospect, especially when so much is available on the table offered to him by the West. And then you look at the other side, you talk about sanctions. Yes, they can impose harsh sanctions, but in today's interdependent world, these harsh sanctions will as much impact the global economy as it will impact Russia. If you take Russia off the SWIFT financial arrangement, as they talk about, how is Europe going to buy its gas and oil? How are they going to get natural resources from Russia? Look at it. Europe imports 40% of its gas from Russia. It imports about a quarter of its oil from Russia. And don't forget other things that people don't seem to know. Russia is the world's largest wheat exporter. Many of you would be surprised to hear that. Russia is the world's largest wheat exporter. Ukraine is, I think, the fourth or fifth largest wheat exporter. So if there is any kind of war, the disruption in supplies, you can imagine. Russia is the second largest exporter of aluminium. It's a huge exporter of copper, nickel, platinum. So can you imagine the disruption that will take place in the commodity markets and the economies of other countries? Of course, Russia will suffer greatly. But it is no consolation to me when I'm suffering to be told that fellow is suffering more. So democratic countries have a problem with their people if they impose sanctions. So this is the other problem. NATO reinforcement is the other thing that the West is saying that we'll do if Russia invades. NATO is already strong. You can see that from this map. So additional forces there, and they've said, the US has said very clearly, we will not put forces in Ukraine. NATO will not put forces in Ukraine. NATO will not fight against Russia. So reinforcement of NATO forces in all around means what? If Russia goes into Ukraine, what are these forces going to do? So we need to see there are these myths which talk about the strong response and so on. We need to know limitations of President Putin, limitations of the West in dealing with this. And as I said, you already have all these leaked public offers there, which provide, in my view, a basis for Russia and the West to negotiate a settlement. Both will make maximalist demands, but that's well known in any negotiation. So one line about the implications, or two lines if you like. What are the geopolitical implications? Well, that of course depends on what actually happens, how the outcome will be. An invasion, as I said, will be a disaster. It will be a disaster economically for Russia. It will be a disaster for the rest of the world as well. Strategically, it actually negates what President Biden set out to do in June. What he set out to do was to prevent the US from being bogged down in Europe and with Russia issues and with Asia. That is why he got out of Afghanistan, so that he can focus on these major domestic issues that wants to focus on: the pandemic, the infrastructure in the US, and what they're trying to do, a recalibration, if you like, of the democracy in the US, internally, domestically. Externally, President Putin has recognized China as his major challenge, principal strategic adversary of the US, and the need to focus on China, and therefore not to get diverted with issues in Europe and Asia against Russia and so on. So that the motive, that objective will be defeated if there is an invasion. If, as I would hope, and objective considerations, Russia actually de-escalates and they then negotiate a settlement on the basis that we've talked about that is existing there, I think things will be much better for India as well, because for India as well, it is important that America ceases to be obsessed with Russia and focuses on China. It takes the pressure a little bit of India-Russia relations, because when US-Russia relations are very bad, then we have great pressure from the US, which is our strategic partner, an important strategic partner, especially but not only because of our maritime cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, which is very important to send a message to China and to deal with China. So we would like to have this freedom to develop relations with Russia, which defense relations are very important. 70% of our equipment comes from Russia. So we would like to be able to simultaneously and separately, though of course interconnected, relations with the US and Russia on separate strategic footing. So this is something that we will be able to do. America will be able to focus more on China. So a settlement between the US and Russia is very much in our interest. And that is what I think we should hope for. Will this actually happen? Well, it should happen objectively, but will it happen? Very often, international developments do not follow logic, do not follow strategic sense, because there are spoilers there. There are a lot of people who do not want US and Russia to settle. Both within the US, you have a number of people who continue to see Russia as the principal adversary. In Europe, there is a great division between those who feel you should reach accommodation with Russia, those who feel an existential threat from Russia, particularly if you look at the Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, which are right on Russia's borders. They're small countries. They feel a great threat from Russia all the time. So you have Europeans who do not wish to see this accommodation go in the manner in which it has been suggested. There are Americans who don't want to. And of course, Ukraine itself has great reservations about the Minsk Agreement. So there are many who do not wish this accommodation to go forward. Last word is China. Look, China would not want this accommodation to go forward. People talk about Russia-China relations, how Russia is close to China, China is close to Russia. But the point is that from China, it is when Russia has a standoff with the US that Russia becomes dependent on China. And that is a situation that China would obviously like to perpetuate. So from a Chinese perspective, US-Russia tensions are the best thing they could have. US-Russia détente are the worst thing that they could have. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, sir. It is always a pleasure to listen to your thought process. So sir has given many food for thought. Like he is talking about that the sanctions it won't only cripple Russia if Russia thinks about invading Ukraine. It will also cripple Europe. Because we all know that how Europe is dependent on Russia's energy, and as Sir has also pointed out that Russia is one of the largest exporter of wheat also, and nickel and all, which are important for Europe. So these are certain important points for which Europe will be thinking about whether sanctions should be imposed or not if Russia goes for invasion. Also, sir has pointed out that Russia should not go for invasion because it doesn't have much to lose, though there are security issues, fears and all, like NATO enlargement. And NATO has given, repeatedly talking about that Ukraine and Georgia's accession as members in NATO will take some time because of its own infrastructure, the governance infrastructure. So for which Russia does not have to worry. Though NATO is also clear that they won't roll back the security demands of the deployment of the 1997, the way Russia is demanding. And as Sir has also pointed out about the Minsk Agreement, which is actually a very important agreement, and it actually caters to Russia's demands. And so Russia, in a way, doesn't have much to lose. Rather, it is going to really hamper Russia in a negative manner in the sense of reputation, and also it will push Russia to China's arms more, which Russia also doesn't want it, because more Russia in the camp of China also means losing its strategic sphere of influence in Central Asia, in its own region, which Russia definitely doesn't want to happen. As well as I really like what sir is talking about, that China definitely will want this this tension between Russia and the West to carry on, because it really sir, not only it gives China the opportunity of bringing Russia to its own arms more closely, but also it gives China the breathing space to continue its own development, becoming a great power from every side. And as you have mentioned that US and Biden is really focusing on the Asia Pacific side, and with this tension becoming more and more, it gives China the breathing space, and which is absolutely not a good news for India, because India really gets trapped between US and Russia, because India really wants to keep a balance between both the countries. And India till now has been able to keep a very independent foreign policy, and we can see it from the Cold War time, and India would want to maintain that. So, sir, with this, I would want to open the floor for question and answer session, sir. But I would take the privilege for asking one quick question, because I'm the moderator. So, sir, according to you, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was one kind of agreement, some kind of clandestine agreement between, President Kennedy and President Khrushchev regarding taking away the missiles from Turkey. So, sir, do you think there will be some kind of arrangement, a clandestine arrangement, which will not be on in the public for many years to come, between Russia and specifically US? What do you think, if there is some kind of an arrangement which could be made? So that would be my question for you. And then we can take up more question from the chat box. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a great point that you've brought up. I'm very glad that you've mentioned the Bay of Pigs incident, because very often these days this particular incident is compared to that. And the other element that you've said is also important, that, when these great powers and these big powers have this public rhetoric, there is a lot going on beneath the surface that we do not know about. Especially now, as you know, there are so many phone calls and meetings taking place, not only the Europeans with Russia, but, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, is in touch with people in Russia. The CIA director has been playing a great role in connection with Russia, which is a very important link, by the way. So, and then so many others. So there is a lot of subterranean activity going on under the cover of the public rhetoric. And this is something, as you say, the Bay of Pigs, the old incident, which is now, 50 years ago actually, 60 years ago now, took place. But the only caveat I will make is that, at that time you could get away with having a private deal which was kept secret for many years. Today, with the kind of information technologies that we have, and the kind of social media that we have, and the number of conflicting interests that we have, I don't think a deal can be kept secret for very long. But as I said, a deal exists. It is not either the maximalist deal that either side is talking about, but a deal certainly exists. And it is by far in the interests of all parties concerned to reach a deal, rather than to go the military route. And that is what gives reason for hope. So one should keep very much in mind the Bay of Pigs incident to understand that there is a lot happening beneath the surface under cover of this hysteria that the media is largely generating. I must tell you one more thing also from my conversations with people in Russia. I have some connections with an Indian company in Russia, which is not far from the Ukraine. It's not close, but not far from the Ukrainian border. And there are people there old enough to remember the Bay of Pigs incident. And they say, when that happened, we had a kind of reservist call-up and a kind of tension that was there in this region. What is happening today is nothing like that. Reservists have not been called up, for example, in Russia. So actually, whatever people may say publicly, in Russia, in that region, you don't have the same kind of tension that the old-timers remember from the Bay of Pigs incident.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, there are some questions in the chat box, and I would just like to take it up for you, sir. So, so one of the questions, by Ashutosh Shastri, he talks about your recent discussion with Dr. Happy Mohan Jacob on this particular topic, and he is talking about your assessment, and his question is, how will President Putin get off the tiger's back that he has been riding? Mr. Shastri's global background is in global energy gas industry.
Yeah, I see that. I see that.
Yes, sir. So.
Yeah, so that is one about how will Putin get off the tiger's back. There is one about Kazakhstan, how is it related to this. And I think delay in S-400 acquisition is the third one.
Yes, right? Sir. And also there is this on core of this conflict, what is the misinterpretation for others' intentions or agreed to complete their geography, or Putin seeking respect in international system, or some dilemma.
I'll come to that. Let me
yes,
first handle the first three. Then
yes, sir. Sure, sir.
That's a handful, actually.
Yes, actually.
But how will Putin get off the tiger's back? Look, I think what President Putin is trying to do is to push to see what is the maximum he can get. Now, also, I think it suits American purpose here. It is my interpretation. I think it suits American purpose also to keep this hysteria going, because America also has to get its European allies to agree to a deal which it finally wants to get. And therefore, I think also this scare about, it's going to be imminent, Americans will withdraw from Ukraine, you see, it's actually putting Ukraine under pressure. It's putting its ally Ukraine under pressure, because Ukraine itself is saying, don't create the scare because all the foreign investors are leaving, our economy is crumbling. It's actually putting pressure on the Ukrainian economy. So that is on the one side. Now, as far as Putin is concerned, there is one good situation he is in, that, for him to withdraw, it will be a popular decision in Russia, because Russia does not want to go to war. Secondly, if you look at the Russian media is not emphasizing all these 130,000 troops on Ukraine border, Belarus border, and Crimea, etc., etc. They're not talking about that. They are talking about their security demands. So if Putin can show to the Russian people that I have these demands which have been accepted, because what is the agreement that long back you promised me NATO will not advance, but NATO kept advancing. Now you have all these missiles which are targeted at us, and you say we are not targeting you. And therefore you are snapping at my heels actually all around the periphery, whether it is in constraining my influence in Asia, West Asia, or in the Caspian, or in the Caucasus. So Putin can have many things to show for this adventure. This is what enables him to get off the tiger's back. The point is that brinkmanship is always on the brink. So you should learn when to withdraw from the brink. And that is where I think this tension today is, that we hope that he will not overplay his hands. The second one was about Kazakhstan. Now, you see, Kazakhstan is a very complex issue. There are various issues involved there, but among them is Russian sphere of influence in Central Asia. That can Russia retain its influence in Central Asia? Because that also it considers very important as a buffer zone for its own security. What happened in Kazakhstan, still the details are not clear. But one of the things that did happen and people talk about is that many pro-Chinese elements in Kazakhstan were eliminated at the end of these discussions. So one should think about that and think about what it means. But the broader issue is that Russia would like to be able to manage its relations with Central Asia without interference from China, which you mentioned, and without interference from the West. And there again, there has been dialogue, there has been quiet dialogue, starting from even the Chief of General Staff and their meetings. There has been some dialogue on Afghanistan and how to deal with the Central Asian situation vis-a-vis Afghanistan. Again, not much clear, but they're all linked, you know. When you talk about Russia's relations with the US, the entire periphery of Russia, as I said, from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, to the Caucasus, to the Caspian, to West Asia and Iran, to Afghanistan and Central Asia. These are linked, and basically what is Putin saying? What President Putin is saying is that I understand that US, America want to disengage from your conflicts in Europe and Asia and focus on China. Fine. I can be with you on that, and I would like a modus vivendi with the US for that. But what I want in return is that I want peace on my periphery. Only that will enable me to have this model. So this is a compact which Putin is offering to Biden and Biden is offering to Putin. Let's see whether that happens. The third question was about, what was the third question actually?
So it was on the S-400 acquisition.
Yeah, okay. Look, we have been talking to America about this. This is in today's world, as I told Happymon Jacobson, somebody mentioned that, we cannot have binaries. There is no exclusive relations that you have because you have your interests on various flanks that you have to protect. So we need the strategic partnership with America very badly, but we equally need the strategic partnership with Russia. We need America to understand that our partnership with Russia is important for us, even to suit American interests. If America wants India to participate as a strong player in the Indo-Pacific, it needs a strong India in South Asia. We become a strong Asia also by, among other things, the military defense cooperation we have with Russia. The Americans understand that, and that is why they were, at the moment, there are various moves to even give a waiver for the S-400, but we need something more than that. We need to be in a situation where for every major arms purchase, we don't need to go running to America saying, will you please waive CATSA for us? So this is it now. If US and Russia reach accommodation, this becomes much easier for us because then US understanding for India's requirements will become much greater. If US-Russia relations degenerate even further, then it becomes very difficult for the US to convince its Congress, for example, that to give a waiver for S-400 when India is dealing with its arch enemy. Again, that is why I said that America and Russia not being arch enemies is very important for our well-being, for our strategic autonomy, for our ambitions on the global scene, and generally for our foreign policy. Okay, what was the, now there was a third very long question.
Yes. So so the question is, in the wake of this crisis, do we see a shift in the European hierarchy of power? Although the UK is having talks and Germany at present seems ambiguous, we see President Macron of France making most of the moves with marathon talks in Moscow followed by Kyiv. Will we see France make even more moves after the so-called AUKUS snub? And how much significance does the Normandy group hold in this?
Last question is the
easiest
with first, the Normandy group.
Yes,
the Normandy group is what is for the implementation of the Minsk agreement. The US has essentially said that we support the Normandy group, which is something which they haven't been saying so publicly before. That's one of the concessions to Russia. So if the Normandy group of France, Germany, Ukraine, and Russia get together and they can implement the Minsk agreement, it is a great move towards sorting out this issue here. But sorry, I again lost track of what the others were. The other issues were what?
It's about the shift in the hierarchy.
European hierarchy. Now, you know, actually what has happened, what today's situation shows, that the European security architecture post-Cold War is still in the process of being developed. And that holds not only for the security architecture, but also the political and economic architecture. You see, what happened after the Cold War was this rapid influx of the Eastern and Central European countries into the EU, as well as NATO. And there is a little struggle for influence as well. You see, what has happened is that the US confrontation with Russia has got support in the Central and Eastern European part, and not such great support with the Western European part, which has been dealing with Russia economically and politically for a long period during the Cold War. So there is a subtle political division in, not so subtle sometimes, between these Central Europeans and Western Europe. And that is also a struggle for economic influence. You know, when they talk about energy security, which is one of the subjects we wanted to talk about, energy security, what do they mean? They mean actually the dependence on Russia for energy. Now, the main area of that dependence comes in Germany. That is why they talk about Nord Stream 2 being sanctioned and so on. What are the Central Europeans talking about? Central Europeans have an initiative called the 3 Seas initiative, which I don't think has got much attention in India. That is those between the Black Sea, the Baltic Sea and the Adriatic Sea. These are countries, which are 12 countries in Central Europe, which are building LNG terminals, which want to import LNG in order to reduce dependence on Russia. What does that mean? That means actually then the energy hub of Europe shifts from the west to the east. So that is again a struggle. So energy security also when they talk about the east-west pipelines, they've not happened because of the disturbances and the economic and legal complications involved there. But that again would certainly move the economic center of gravity of Europe eastward. So there is a struggle within Europe for political influence or economic influence, which is also playing itself out in this US-Russia. Now, to describe this would take very, very long. It can't be done in the course of 5 minutes. But this is the short point there, that Europe is still in churn, and of course, even culturally. You see the issues that the EU has with Hungary and Poland on various issues of adherence to EU values. Now, EU values is something that has to be redefined after the new countries have joined. That's also a socio-cultural churn in progress. So all these are playing out in Europe, and they will all impact also on US-Russia relations.
Thank you, sir. Sir, just last one question, if you can, talk about. So one person has asked you about the Turkey's role in this whole crisis, because Turkey happens to be a NATO member, and we also know that how Turkey and NATO itself has fallen apart. So how do you see? Because I still remember during the Kerch incident, when the Ukraine had approached Turkey not to stop the Bosphorus Strait so that the Russians cannot, intervene and all. So Turkey actually moved back. It did not say anything. So how do you see Turkey's role in this whole crisis at this current time?
That's again a very interesting question. And the role of Turkey gets little attention. But Turkey has a critical role has critical importance for everybody for geostrategic reasons. Its location on the Black Sea, its controlling of the Bosphorus Straits, which you rightly talked about, its membership of NATO. Now, and on the other side is Turkish ambitions to acquire a much greater position on the world stage. Many people talk about it as regaining its Ottoman influence. Well, that may be an exaggeration, but it has both ethnic and strategic locational advantages in order to expand, to grow its wings. And Turkey, at the moment, one can say, except for the fact that its economy is collapsing and Erdogan's popularity in Turkey may be waning a bit, it's actually trying to play its cards very cleverly. It is a member of NATO, as you rightly said, but it has contracted for the S-400 with Russia. It is actually its economic dependence on Russia is increasing because of trade, because of tourism, and because also of oil and gas. It has got this Turk Stream link also from Russia. And so it is, on the one hand, trying to do what NATO wants it to do in Syria and other places. On the other hand, it's a member of the Astana group with Russia and Iran for settlement in Syria, though it opposes Bashar al-Assad. In Libya, the two sides are actually fighting against each other. Their proxies are killing each other. In Idlib also, their proxies have been killing each other. So, Turkey is trying to be all things to all people, and nobody wants to take it on because of the, you don't want to lose the Black Sea power, which has a critical, we talked about all this NATO, and Turkey plays a critical role in keeping the Black Sea, either turning it into a NATO lake or keeping it as a Russian lake. So it has great potential. The only thing that can bring Turkey down is Erdogan himself. But you see, from our perspective, Turkey is also reaching out all the way across Central Asia. It's making use of its Turkic connections. It already had good relations with Pakistan. And therefore, when NATO left Kabul, Turkish forces remained there in control of Kabul airport. So Turkey's reach is the attempted reach right across the Caucasus. Its role in Azerbaijan, Armenia dispute, where Russia is the nominal winner, but Turkey is a great winner in influence in Azerbaijan and its reach to the Caspian. So again, Turkey and its role merits another 1 hour conversation. But I think Turkey is deserving of much greater attention in India than it gets today. Of course, we don't like him talking about Kashmir, but I think we also need to handle him a little better. And that's another story.
Thank you so much, sir. We have overshot the time by 1 minute, but I mean, it's such a great pleasure to hear you. And as you said, Turkey itself is a 1 hour, more than a 1 hour discussion. And so I won't take much time. Again, it's a huge privilege and honor to moderate your session, sir. I'm having that fan moment right now. So thank you so much. And thank you to Asian Pathfinder for giving me this opportunity. And thank you to each one of the audience here for your participation. Thank you once again, and please take care, stay safe, sir, and also to everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Asian Pathfinders for inviting me. Thank you, Indrani, for conducting it so wonderfully.
Thank you so much.
And it's been a very invigorating discussion, which I greatly enjoyed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Indrani, and thank you, Ambassador Raghavan. I think I can see already people are posting comments, and I'm sure everyone really enjoyed the discussion. As Indrani said, we all learned a lot. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. And Indrani, as Ambassador Raghavan said, amazing moderation. So thank you so much. And you've given us a point for, I think, our future sessions. So we'll try and do a session on Turkey also in the future. So thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend and stay safe. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. All the best. All the best
sir.
to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Indrani.
Thank you, Shreyash. Thank you.
Thank you.